Now, for this morning, well, for a large part of this morning on our show, we are privileged and we're pleased to welcome the MP for Tobago East, as well as the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs. And that, of course, is none other than the Honorable Miss Ayanna Webster-Roy. So welcome and good morning to you, Minister. How are you doing?
Good, Kandace. Good morning to you. Good morning to Tobago. Good morning to the people of Tobago East. It's a pleasure to be here with you to have a conversation.
And certainly, and we're going to be discussing quite a lot of things this morning. But I first want to get started from one of those stories that I read on the news this morning, and that is in regards to some disturbing information of some child abuse cases that keep popping up. What's the latest? I know that this is something that you're keeping an eye on, especially with the Children's Authority being under your purview and so on. What's the latest? And tell me about some of the interventions that are being made.
Okay, so Kandace, this month, as you know, April is Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month. And we were fortunate to launch it with not only a publication, but also a partnership between the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, and the Member of Parliament for Kumutu Manzanilla, where we launched an initiative called In the Know, On the Go. Right. Yeah. So what we're doing is going back to the communities, engaging communities, empowering persons within communities to understand what child abuse is, understand the signs of child abuse, and then most importantly, what to do if you're aware of child abuse occurring within your community. I would have mentioned that this initiative that we launched in collaboration with the MP for Kumutu Manzanilla is specifically in the know, on the go. However, throughout the month of April, we'll be doing a number of activities throughout Trinidad and Tobago, highlighting how important it is for us to safeguard our children. I want to stress, Canada, how important it is for every single individual, every man, woman, boy and girl to understand that ending child abuse, ending any form of violence in our country is all our responsibility. As I say, it's all our business.
Yes.
So all hands on deck. We must ensure that our children are fully aware and understand that they have rights and their rights are protected and promoted. We must ensure that our children understand what is abuse and also what they should do in instances of abuse. But most importantly, we must ensure that our adults are allies in this fight to end child abuse in Trinidad and Tobago.
No, I mean, unfortunately, we're seeing these cases popping up way too often than we would like it to happen. I mean, what has been discovered in terms of the work that the Children's Authority has been doing as to, some of the reasons why we keep being faced with some of these cases?
Candace, it is frightening to know that in most instances where children are abused, it's not really stranger danger as we talk about. It's someone known to the child, someone known to the family. So it means that within our homes, within our communities, there are persons who are deliberately, intentionally harming vulnerable persons, especially our children. And that's why I often call for personal accountability. I often say that if each individual strive to do better and be better, we could bring about a change. But while we are hoping that the behavior change occurs, we have been doing work to strengthen the Children's Authority. The Minister of Finance would have provided the funding required to ensure that the transformation that was required for the authority coming out of recommendations, from the Justice Judith Jones report, that the transformation is occurring in terms of increasing staffing, increasing facilities. You're aware that in Tobago we have a presence. I mean, that was one of the things that when I became minister, I advocated for, and I ensured that in Tobago we have a presence of the Children's Authority, we have staff, competent staff, trained staff, and also that we have facilities so our children who have to be received into the care of the authority, there's a safe space available in Tobago. But institutions aside, establishing safe spaces, ensuring that we have trained persons aside, what we need is for more persons to speak up, to be vocal, to whenever they see something, say something. And I want to
know.
Yes, and I want to commend the persons who would have brought the last two cases to the attention of the authorities, because a Facebook post was shared to me and I contacted immediately Senior Superintendent Claire Guy Allen from the Victim and Witness Support Unit and the Special Victims Unit of Trinidad Police Service, right? And she said to me, I'm on it. And I felt comforted knowing that the police was on it, the Children's Authority was on it. And in both instances, the children were removed from the situation of harm and placed into the care of the authority. One of the things I want to mention as we are on the point of the Children's Authority, in the past, persons would have always stressed out, we need spaces to place children, but it's not our philosophy or policy to put children in institutions or what we call homes or orphanages. What we want is for our children to remain in safe, loving, family-type settings. And what we have done is, in an aid to ensure that happens, introduce a policy called kinship foster care policy, where a child who would have been removed from their biological parents, if there's an instance where that child, you can't find another blood relative who might be able to care for the child, kinship foster care allows it to be extended towards a good parent, someone known to the child and known to the family. Once they are assessed and they're found capable and ready and willing and able to care for that child, they will receive the support of the Children's Authority. In the past, we would have recognized where, in some instances, persons were willing to, but they didn't have the financial means. Kinship foster care allows them to get that support from the state to provide that loving support and family-type environment for that child who is in need of care and support.
And then we found out just earlier this week that there's been some changes in even the way how we handle adoption and so on, that reducing the amount of time to about 6 months.
But the thing with adoption, right? I was listening to a program yesterday, and one of the challenges we are facing is that persons want to adopt, but in most instances, persons want a baby. We have children available sometimes. They might not be a baby, a toddler, might be older teenagers, tweens, you know, but that might not be what an potential adoptive parent might want. The other issue is that sometimes we are faced with a situation where a child may be in the care of the state and the parents don't want to relinquish their parental rights. So you might have a child might be a perfect candidate for adoption, but unless you cross that hurdle where the parents are willing to relinquish that rights, then we face the situation, people waiting, and children in the care of the state, and people ask me, well, why are we not getting to adopt, whatever? But there's a number of issues around it. However, the Children's Authority has been working to ensure that we bring on that time. We have been looking at legislation that we may need to address to ensure that we make it easier for the children, because at the end of the day, what we operate with is the best interest of the child principle. Whatever we do, whatever we are doing, we must ensure that the best interest of the child is always at the forefront of all our actions, our policies, and our programs.
And I mean, it's one of the reasons also why the Children's Authority has been speaking quite a lot about fostering and having citizens step forward and be foster parents. Now, have we seen that increase, especially here in Tobago? Have we seen people stepping forward and trying to be a part of that program?
I would like to say that we could encourage more persons to come on board. So I wanted to use this opportunity to make an appeal. If it is that you're willing to open up your heart and your home to care for a child who might be in a vulnerable situation, please consider becoming a foster carer in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, you can never have too many persons on your system, because as we move children out of harm and we move children into places of safety, into homes, you see children constantly coming into the system. And again, Kandace, until we get to that place where we have that full change in behavior and mindset and attitude towards our children, then unfortunately there will always be a place for the Children's Authority. There's always going to be a need for foster parents, adoptive parents. There's always going to be a need for us to have even homes, established institutions to care for children, until all of Trinidad and Tobago decides to do better and be better.
Now, what about in terms of some of these statistics or some of the data? What has the data shown recently about what's been happening with our children here in Tobago?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't call the figures.
Okay.
But unfortunately, if you look at our population size, it is quite alarming. We have a serious problem, not only in Tobago, but in Trinidad and Tobago. And me being Tobagonian, sometimes when I look at the data, especially when it comes to neglect and sexual abuse, we have a lot of work to do. I don't want to stress on the numbers and the statistics, but just want to let the Tobago public know that we have a lot of work to do. And I go back to mindset. it's so easy for us to think that it's okay for us to leave our children unattended to go to a vet or to go wherever, and not knowing and not appreciating the fact that that is a form of abuse. Neglect is a form of abuse. It's so easy for us in some of our communities to have people saying,
we are back with the Minister for the MP for Tobago East and the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister for Gender and Child Affairs, and of course that is the Honourable Ayanna Webster-Roy, as we are discussing some of the things on the her portfolio, particularly children. And just before we had that break, we were discussing just a little bit about child abuse and the prevalence of it in Tobago, and just some of the crazy data that pops up. So I mean, you could just this notion or this mentality amongst some of our people about the way we treat with the sexuality of our children, Minister.
Yes, yes, Kandace. Before we had the break, I was telling that in some of our communities, and this is something I've experienced, I've heard. I live in my constituency, I live in Tobago, and it's not new. It's something I grew up hearing in Tobago. After 12 is lunch, and you must sample it home before you send it outside, not understanding how we are damaging our children. And hurt children become hurt adults, and hurt adults sometimes go on to hurt other people.
Yes.
So we have to break the cycle, especially in our communities where it's accepted, and it should not be accepted, that before your child leaves home, they must be sampled at home first. That is wrong. And it's time that we start speaking up as Tobagonians, acknowledging that we have, in some of our communities, we have problems, especially as it relates to child abuse, and start lending our voices towards creating a better, safer environment for our children. One of the things I want to note is that over the years, through the work of the Gender and Child Affairs Division, especially through our Child Rights Ambassadors program, we are seeing where more and more for our children or young people are becoming empowered to speak up and speak out. So children now are the ones who are making the call when their friends confide in them. Children now are the ones who, when there are issues in their community, they are highlighting those issues, and not only just highlighting the issues, but also coming to us with possible solutions, how we could create interventions to address the issues in the communities. And I want to take this moment to really commend the communities and the schools across Tobago who would have participated in the Child Rights Ambassadors program over the years, because we have been starting to see a change. And I often say, once you target your children and you start changing mindsets with your children, then you can start influencing the way your society will develop and the way your society thinks. So I want to commend all the schools, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, and in Tobago in particular, for embracing the opportunity to have children empowered. Another strategy that we have been using to address issues around gender-based violence, and this is a more holistic national overview and strategy, so National Strategic Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and Sexual Violence, 2023 to 2027. This represents the largest political and financial investment in this cause. And it is a combination of work that would have involved civil society, development partners, government, academia, everybody coming together to shape this national action plan. And what it does, it holds agencies, persons, institutions accountable, because under every different pillar, you know who is responsible for what are the targets, and how we should be implementing. I must say a lot of the work would have commenced even before we launched the NSAP. NSAP costs over 100 million TT dollars. Much of it and much of the work coming through the support of our development partners. So we would have had the support of the UN system in Trinidad and Tobago. On the Spotlight Initiative, we also had the support of the European Union. And with NSAP, what we are focusing is on prevention, protection of the survivors, prosecution, penalties, and provision for redress. Those are the key areas we are looking at. Strengthening the response that ensure that at 2027 mark, we could say that in Trinidad and Tobago, we would have seen a drastic reduction in instances of gender-based violence and sexual violence. So that's one of the strategies we are using as well.
How does that also relate even to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, where as that Trinidad and Tobago is part of in terms of achieving certain things by the year 2030, because it's just interesting that you have this one project there to have some achievements by 2027, and yet we're also a part of the UN Sustainable Goals project. Now, just tell me about the relationship with those things and the support that we're getting from the United Nations for some of these work here in Trinidad and Tobago.
So a lot of what we have been doing at Gender and Child Affairs would have been underpinned by our responsibilities and our key focal points under the SDGs. So we receive full support from a number of the UN agencies within the Trinidad and Tobago and within the Caribbean region. Spotlight, I would have mentioned before, Spotlight was one of the key activities coming out to help us towards attaining a greater level of gender equality and promoting gender equity in Trinidad and Tobago. So Spotlight initiative would have focused on a number of communities, Tobago being one. As I often say, as minister, I ensure that Tobago is never left out. So Tobago was included as one of the focal point communities for the Spotlight initiative. And a number of activities would have taken place under Spotlight geared towards ensuring that we create a gender just society, but more importantly, ensuring that we reduce instances of violence, especially violence towards women and girls. And Spotlight focused on family violence. So that is where we'd have received support for even things like the National Child Policy. That is where we'd have, I mentioned the NSAP, that is where we'd have received the support for the NSAP. And all of this under a broader context towards us ensuring that as we approach 2030, Trinidad and Tobago is at a place where we can say, if not we are there, we are almost there. Just recently, I went to the UN for the Commission on the Status of Women, and I felt really proud to report on the work that we have been doing in Trinidad and Tobago, especially as it pertains to the advancement of women and the protection of the rights of women and girls in Trinidad and Tobago. Not forgetting and not leaving out that men are important and crucial allies and partners as we move towards a more gender-just society. And I remember I had the opportunity to speak at a round table, and I said, while I acknowledge there's still a lot of work to be done, I want to highlight the fact that in Trinidad and Tobago, we are seeing where women are playing a remarkable role in leading at many different institutions. And I felt proud to highlight the fact. I said, the North Tobago House of Assembly, our presiding officer is a woman. I said, the Commissioner of Police is a woman. And I went on to list where women are playing a meaningful role in shaping national development. But at the end of it, I still said there is work still left to be done, because we are not at a stage where we can say that, yes, all is well. We can't say all is well because we still have women who are being victims of gender-based violence, domestic violence. We still have cases where women are just being found burnt by the side of the road in a car. So until we reach a stage where all our women are safe and secure, then I could go back to the UN and say, yes, we have women in leadership, but we also have a very safe society.
So how far are we in, achieving those goals? How far are we in making sure we align with that 2030 vision?
Well, we have a policy on gender development. While it's a green paper, government has accepted it for use within the public sector and within the government system. So our gender policy guides us towards attaining our commitments under the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's not just with SDGs, even though gender might be linked to particular items, when you really examine the entire commitments, all the commitments under the SDG, you see gender running through it. Because if you look at climate change and the impact of climate change, women are most vulnerable.
Yes.
Especially women in rural communities where they may be depending on agriculture for their livelihoods. If you look at water and water security and all of that, access to water, women again are also very vulnerable. Because, take for example, if you live in a community where you don't have potable water, access to potable water, then that would mean you having to get up, trek into a river or spring to get water to do your daily household duties, etc. How does that impact your ability then to pursue your educational aspirations? How does that affect your ability to pursue your career goals? How does that affect your ability to properly care and nurture for your children and your family? So throughout everything, you see the theme of gender and women as cross-cutting.
And then what are some of the challenges too that we are facing just as a nation and especially even as a ministry in breaking down those barriers for us to be able to really have a society where gender abuse, child abuse and so on is eliminated?
Kandace, and it goes back again to mindset. And because sometimes people have deeply entrenched values that may not be right, and to help them to move out of that frame of mind, that is the most difficult task. And for us at the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, public education and sensitization must be an ongoing effort. You have to keep bringing the issues in people's faces, bringing it in the ears. You have to keep highlighting it to create that awareness, but most importantly, to try to create that behavior change. And in NAC is under my portfolio, National AIDS Coordinating Committee, and one of the things that they are looking at is a strategy for communication strategy for behavior change. How do we communicate with the public to bring about the behavior change that we want to see? Even at Central Administrative Services Tobago, where I'm also the minister with responsibility for that office, we're looking at how do we communicate with the Tobago public to bring about some of the behavior change that we want to see in Tobago. So, for example, there are a number of opportunities available in Tobago for Tobagonians and nationally for Tobagonians, but I have found that we tend to be laid back. And we don't tend to be very forceful in seeking information and seeking self-empowerment. We tend to.
Back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Our viewers, again, we need to apologize for that break in transmission, but don't worry, we still have the MP for Tobago East and the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister for Gender and Child Affairs, the Honorable Ayanna Webster-Roy. She continues to be here with us as we discuss quite a number of things. Now, I just want to get into some of the things that are also happening in Tobago through her ministry and, of course, through her work as an MP. So, first of all, there are some programs for people who are suffering or who have been dealing with trauma and so on to get assistance. So tell us about that.
So Kandace, again, I just want to share a little joke with the public before we start here. I asked them if I'm breaking down the system. It might be short because I'm here. But Tobagonians, I'm here to report to you. Yes. And having said that, I want to highlight an initiative that we recently launched nationally, and I want to encourage Tobagonians to please grasp this opportunity, especially for civil society organizations working with persons who may have been victims or persons who are victims of gender-based violence, both male and female. We have what we call the Survivors Transformation and Empowerment Program. This program provides funding and support for civil society organizations working with survivors and victims of gender-based violence. What it does, it allows civil society organizations to receive funding up to $50,000 to provide training for survivors who may want to pursue a business opportunity or learn a skill to help them to emerge from their better from their situation. We would have deliberately launched this initiative because we recognize that most of our survivors of domestic violence tend to return to the perpetrators because they are financially dependent on them. So we want to break the cycle by ensuring their economic empowerment. So with the $50,000 funding as is available, you can train up to a minimum of 10 persons. And I want to call churches in Tobago, groups in Tobago, anybody in Tobago working with survivors to please grasp this opportunity. STEP also allows the survivor or the victim to access funding, either an academic scholarship up to $10,000 or $10,000 for either developing a business that you have in mind or enhancing an existing business that you have as a survivor that will help you to be economically empowered and not dependent on the perpetrator. So that's one of the things that I want to mention. I also want to mention an initiative that we would have recently launched in the constituency office specifically for men. Because in discussion, we recognize that we tend to focus a lot on women and the issues affecting women, not recognizing that men are equal meaningful contributors and partners in the development process. And if we talk about gender equality and equity, and if we talk about mainstreaming gender, and if we talk about a just society, then we must acknowledge that men are part of the process.
And I think we have been had some statistics coming out recently that we are seeing a rise in suicide rates among our men.
Yes, and that need for support. So coming out of my first hang jack initiative, that's what we call it, hang jack, playing on the all fours thing, concept, right? One of the things that men on the block ask for us to do is to create a safe space for them, where they could come in and there are persons who are trained and able to provide that guidance and that support. We are seeing where a lot of our young men are crying out for help, and then they don't feel comfortable that there are enough resources in place to assist them. Because I didn't go to hang jack because it's a safe space for men. I allowed my the male members of my team at the office to lead that initiative. But the feedback was that it was really, really, really successful in terms of men opening up, and for them to bring forward a proposal and a suggestion for us to have a safe space in Tobago for them. I think that is really commendable.
And then how do we ensure that something like this continues? Because
partnership and collaboration, Kandace. Because I remember when the feedback came to me and I spoke to my permanent secretary in Trinidad, I said, this is something that we have to do in collaboration with the Tobago House of Assembly. I mean, in all the work that we have been doing, the Tobago House of Assembly would have been meaningful partners and collaborators. They are part of our steering committee on standing committee on child protection. We have representatives there. The Tobago House of Assembly would have been instrumental in terms of the NSAP, because they were part of Tobago was part of the Spotlight Initiative, one of the focal committees. So we have the support. And I said for us so that we could try to establish a space, but we will need that support from the Tobago House for to ensure that it is sustainable. Because in Tobago, because of the way the legislation is established and laid out now, there are certain things that the THE has responsibility for. So that need for collaboration and partnership, especially with the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, that is critical. So one of the things that we're going to do is in coming weeks reach out to the Secretary and the Division to see how we could establish the safe space that is required for men in Tobago, as we have been highlighted on the block by men. Another initiative that is coming to Tobago, and again we're doing this in collaboration and in partnership again with Central Administrative Services Tobago, and also bringing on board the support of the THA, is something that we launched recently in Trinidad, what we call our Women's Village. It's an opportunity for the empowerment of women. Again, looking not only at women who are survivors of gender-based violence, but women who want to be in business, who have their own business and want the opportunity to promote and have a platform. So we have the Women's Village, where we bring them together in a space and have the public come in and give them full support. The first one we had was up at the Center of Excellence in Macoya, and it was well oversubscribed. I mean, I felt proud walking through that space, seeing so many women-owned businesses there. I mean, I bought honey from a young girl, 14 years old, who took over this business from her father, and I felt really proud to see a 14-year-old girl carrying on a family business tradition. I mean, I saw persons who have been through trauma in their life, but now with their business, they are thriving and being able to not only support their family, but support other women by creating opportunities for employment. So on the 30th of April, we will be bringing this initiative to Tobago. So look out, Tobago, please come out and support the business people. As I said in Trinidad, buy them out, you know, give them that full support. And
then even you have something else that you're launching at the end of the month as well?
No, that was the Women's Village. But what I have in my constituency that's coming up again in April in another community is what we call Chai and Chat. That is an initiative I started in my first term as Member of Parliament for Tobago East, and we have continued. Chai and Chat provides, again, a safe space for women to meet, to share ideas on how to cope with various issues, to learn from each other. I mean, every Chai and Chat would have been a hit. And at every Chai and Chat, we've had women open up about their personal life stories and the situations, but not just open about getting the support. Either the support from women around the table with them, or from the professionals that we have on board who provide guidance and counseling and strategies to cope. So again, Tobago East, look out for the next edition of Chai and Chat coming to a community in Tobago East, might be near yours.
Now, I mean, what's good happening also even in collaboration with NGOs, especially because, I mean, a lot of these organizations are on the ground working with these vulnerable people in our society. And one of the complaints a lot that you get is that they don't feel like they have enough support because the work that they have to do is quite a lot. So tell me about just, I mean, your influence in being able to collaborate with them and to give them as much support as you can.
So in Tobago, I often say we are fortunate to get two bites of the cherry. So civil society organizations in Tobago could get support from the THA and they could get support from central government. So there are some organizations that would have received funding through Central Administrative Services Tobago for community activities. There are some organizations that would have received funding through Gender and Child Affairs, and then some of these same organizations would receive funding through different divisions of the Tobago House of Assembly. Just recently, we had the distribution of what we call dignity kits. And that was a collaborative effort where the United Nations would have supported us in providing the dignity kits. We had a distribution in Trinidad, and we also had distribution in Tobago at Central Administrative Services. We would have provided dignity kits to TIMA, the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, as well as Tabitha's House. That is an NGO that is doing tremendous work for women in Tobago, as well as Women of Substance. Everybody knows about Women of Substance and the work that Onika does. Right, so we would have provided the dignity kits to those two NGOs in particular because we recognize that the work that they've been doing to support women, especially when they're at a place where they have to run, where they're a place that they have to pick up and go, so that whenever they reach out to these organizations, there's already a kit in place that we could hand to our survivors. So the kit contains personal sanitary products, as well as torchlight, different things like that to aid persons, not only for domestic violence situations, but also in times of if you have a natural disaster. Women tend to be more vulnerable at times of natural disaster, so the kit also provides that relief for them. If there's a big hurricane, we know that it's available to support them as well.
Certainly. All right, well, we're getting ready to wrap up this morning, and of course, before we go, I just want to thank you for being on with us, but I have to ask you, are you going to be putting yourself up for re-election next year? Do you intend to go back for a third term in office?
So the People's National Movement has a very clear process, and that process starts with nominations, and the party groups must nominate persons. So when that time comes and that bridge appears, I will cross it.
All right, great. Well, then thank you so much, and continue doing the good work, especially the interventions that are necessary for children and gender here in our society, because we know there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, it is.
So
but
thank you so much.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve.
All right, great. All right, well, viewers, we got to go for a break, but we'll be right back after this, so don't go anywhere.